Okay, so the track I chose to recreate is a track by Rusty called All Night. The reason for choosing this is it's quite similar to the type of music I make anyway, and I'm quite familiar with the track. I know it quite well, so it was easier to sort of like tear it apart, if that makes sense. Um, okay. In terms of research, there wasn't a lot, to be honest. I did find out that he uses Ableton Live for most of his stuff. I assume this track was made in Ableton Live. I couldn't find any additional information on that. And there is a sample in the track by Maya. My Love Is Like Whoa, it's like a 2-second sample. It's basically he sampled a vocal and just pitched it in different ways. Okay. So, the first thing I did, and it's normally the first thing I do when I'm doing this sort of thing, is I work out the BPM. So for this particular track, to do that actually, I just imported it into Tractor, and I find Tractor's quite accurate with its BPM counter. So I was able to work out basically that is at 144 BPM. So this kind of allowed me to use the actual track as a sort of blueprint. And I mean, if I play it back, I suppose I should play the track. So this is the original, just in case you haven't heard it before. Solo play. So if I turn on the track, it should be fairly accurate. I think it stays in pretty much all the way through the track. Yeah, pretty much. So that kind of made my life a lot easier because I had basically the real track as a blueprint to kind of fall back on while I was sort of like working out what's playing and when what is playing and all of that sort of stuff. So really, the first thing I did was try and work out the opening bass line, which I suppose I would play it to give you. And so on. So to work that out, I tried doing it by ear and just a keyboard and trying to sort of like work out how to play it, because it does sound like he played it with a keyboard. It doesn't sound like he's drew that in with MIDI notes. It kind of, to me at least, sounds like it's been played on something. So I tried to do it that way. I tried to kind of just listen to the track and try and work out the notes, but I wasn't getting very good results with that. I was kind of like missing certain notes, missing sort of like accents, and kind of my playing was a bit sloppy, so I was getting terrible results. So instead, what I did, instead of playing it, was literally go through every single beat by highlighting. Oh god, zoom in. I'd highlight a beat, solo that, and it will sound terrible. And kind of try and isolate the bass note from that. And let me find my bass patch. At this point, I'm just using raw sawtooth waves. I think at this point was the bass through the ES2. It wasn't originally this patch actually. I think I changed the patch once I wrote the bass, but originally it was just a raw sawtooth wave, sort of 12 octaves down, and I would just sort of go through the track bar by bar, kind of, and just work out what note that is. So kind of like that, and then I would just progress through the track basically doing that method. And I did that pretty much for half of the song, and I guess I'll play you the end result, which I think is fairly accurate to what he actually plays in the song. And so on. So I basically did that for, I'd say, up to about the halfway point, and then after that, in terms of the bass patch, he starts sort of repeating the phrases. He kind of really uses some of the phrases and just starts repeating them later on in the track. So I didn't really need to go through and sort of do it for the whole track, because I would start noticing where he would repeat the phrases. There's quite a lot of variation in the first half of the song in terms of that bass patch. It does really sound like he has played that with something. I'm not sure what, but yeah. And I kind of built the bass and drums around that. I sort of used a similar technique for working out the MIDI drums. I called my drums running through battery, which I probably shouldn't have, but I mean, I could have done the same thing using Ultra Bit. It's just easier and quicker for me to use battery because I've got ready-made patches. And yeah, I kind of used the same approach for trying to work out what the drum was playing. It was quite difficult to work out the hi-hats. I suppose I should play drum tracks, at least for the beginning section of the song. It was difficult to try and work out what the hi-hats were actually playing. There seemed to be quite a lot of clutter in the original mix in terms of hi-hats. So it's really what I could sort of hear is what I put down in MIDI notes, which may be slightly off. So I'll play that. And again, I think that technique of going through it beat by beat while painstakingly slow actually worked out quite well. And like, once I played everything back, I was kind of surprised how accurate I was able to get some of the stuff, particularly the bass patch. Yeah, and again, after about halfway through the track, he starts repeating certain phrases. So I didn't really need to do the whole track bar by bar. I'd start noticing where we'd use the same sort of drum loops. I'm kind of surprised how much of the kick drum is actually the same all the way through the track. There's not a lot of variation in the kick drum. It seems to be 8-bar phrases and then just repeated basically. There does seem to be two different kick sounds, one sort of like a higher pitched kick sound and a lower thud, and you can kind of notice when the thud comes in. It's kind of obvious when you're listening to it back. So I've sort of done a similar thing. I've got a sort of a higher sort of hip hop kick, I think that is, and a lower sort of thud, sort of more electronic sort of low toned kick. And yeah, basically that's how I did the drums. In terms, there's a couple of snares, I suppose. I'm not sure if I really need to play them. You'll hear them in the actual track, but there are multiple snare sounds. There's a couple of finger snaps during certain parts, and then a real sort of rockish kind of hard snare in the kind of like dubsteppy sections of the track, for lack of a better term. Okay, I should talk about the sample he uses as a vocal track in that particular track. He sampled a song called My Love Is Like Woe by Maya, and he basically takes two snippets from this song, two very short snippets. The first one sort of occurs here. It's kind of like a woe. he kind of takes that and basically pitches it up and down throughout the track, that just whoa, and a little melody after it he uses. Okay, so the second sample occurs here. And I ran into a lot of issues trying to pitch that second sample. I tried using auto-tune because it sounds like he uses auto-tune. It's got that distinctive sort of up and down pitchy auto-tune sound. And both Waves Tune and Logic's inbuilt flex pitch could not detect the pitch on that particular sample. It was just coming up blank. And then I realised why. I did a little research into this track and found out that there is an actual a cappella version that was on the vinyl release, and I'm pretty sure I was able to find it, and I'm pretty sure he used the a cappella to for the vocal sample. So I actually I've got the a cappella here. Okay, so here's the sample on the a cappella track. I run into the same issues because it's multiple layers of vocals. Both Waves Tunes and Logic Flex Picks couldn't detect the pitch, so it made tuning that particular sample very difficult. I tried using samplers, and the playback, I couldn't quite get the playback right, and it still sounded wrong. I had multiple Logic files open trying to pitch this one sample. It took me, and basically I couldn't do it. The only other thing that I didn't do that I can think of is maybe use Melodyne, and I don't have Melodyne, so maybe it was Melodyne to sort of detect the multiple pitches. But as a result, I had to directly use his sample in my track rather than recreating what he had done. Only for the second sample. For the first woes, I was able to pitch him and get him pretty accurate to the track. But here's what I initially took from the a cappella anyway, just for reference, I suppose. So yeah, that's the issues I had with the vocals. I'll show you in the actual my actual project folder what I've done with them in greater detail. So okay, so there's a combination of that a cappella track I showed you and directly ripped from his track. I think maybe this might be the best place to show you. Okay. Okay, so these ones, they're just being pitch shifted basically. I was going to use a sampler, but instead I found it easier just to work out how many semitones down it was from the original pitch and just have them on an audio track with a pitch shift. I did that basically for all the different woes throughout the track. If I mute the lights. And there is a little bit of artifacts there. I tried some drastic EQ to try and get rid of some of that, but it worked out okay. I think maybe it might have been worth my time to actually try and get a sampler to play those pitches, but I'd already invested all the time into sort of placing the samples and pitching them that I didn't really want to go back on that work. So that's the vocals for this track. Okay, the lead that occurs throughout the track is probably my favourite part of the track, to be honest. I really like the lead sound on this track. In terms of what he's playing, it was fairly easy to mimic it with an actual keyboard. All of this is played in live for a MIDI keyboard. Yeah, it wasn't too hard to work out. Again, like the bass patch, I had a basic sawtooth patch, did all the MIDI data, and then went back and tried to recreate the actual sound. Okay, I used a multiple of synths to try and recreate that. I have one retro synth, To be honest, I can't really remember what I did. There was a lot of experimenting and playing around with. It seems like I settled on a rave table synth. There was a lot of trial and error in trying to recreate that sound, which is why there's multiple synths playing the same thing. I think if I just put the retro synth. Okay, yeah, so I'm using that mainly for the sort of voicing, the sort of like movement of the sound, whereas I think this is more the phase than. Okay, this seems to be just like a standard square wave. I think this was maybe for the attack. To be honest, when I'm working with synth sounds, I kind of get lost down a rabbit hole and I end up with what I end up. A lot of it is processing and all. I'll go in greater detail about my bus channels and my processing later, but I think a lot of the sound is actually coming through processing. I got a general idea of the sound and what I played, and then sort of added the effects and processing to make it sound a lot more like the original. It's not quite there, but it's as close to that I could get it, basically. Okay, there is another synth patch on this track, well, synth part, multiple patches, and it's, I'll just play it, it'll be easier. Okay, logical mode. Okay, so that plays kind of throughout the track in various parts. It has this weird phasing thing going on. It's being panned, well, firstly it's being panned from left to right through the headphones. It also seems to be a high pass filter sweep on it, on the actual. I'll play the original track, see if you can try and isolate that part. Okay, so it was kind of hard to get that high pass filter sweep. I was trying with some of the retro synth envelopes and using the amp envelope to try and like sweep up, but I wasn't really getting very good results with that actually. It kind of still. So what I did in the end was I used auto filter and I automated basically filter sweeps. If I can find where it is. Yeah, I basically just drew in sort of envelope shapes and sort of did filter sweeps that way rather than having it through the actual filter on the synths, and it came out okay. I believe these are multiple of the same patch just to thicken up the sound. Yeah, I think maybe some of them are doing slightly different things in terms of the envelope. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. Some of them have a low pass filter sweep, some of them have a high pass filter sweep. I forget why. And I believe there wasn't much in terms of synthesis. Oh, I should talk about the second bass. The kind of dubstep-ish bass. I'll play the original first. It was kind of hard to recreate. So, to me, it sounded like a wavetable synth, kind of sweeping up while having a lower sort of subbier bass line underneath, and that's pretty much what I did. I played around with the wave shapes and found one that kind of sounded similar, and I used the envelope to sort of sweep up. And I think the envelope's also automating the wave shape, so as the sound plays, it will play through the wave shapes. Um, and I kind of I did have this just on its own, and it sounded kind of weak in the low end, so I kind of low passed it, and it just left the top end. And underneath that, I've basically just got sort of like a subby re-space, just kind of playing the same notes, and it kind of has some like natural movement anyway, and together they sound like this. Later on, I do add in an additional retro synth to that bass line, just to add a bit more grit. And on that additional retro synth, I've got it going through a pedal board and one of the distortion units, just to kind of like rough it up a bit. This is what these sound like. An additional note, actually, and I suppose this will tie me into my processing, is I've actually got these bass patches going to a bus that's being sidechained to the snare. This is only on the I only use sidechain on these basses basically because on this section with the sort of basically the snare wasn't cutting through as much as I'd like, particularly for this section, and I've only got the snare coming through that sidechain, so I suppose this is what it sounds like with everything. I don't think I sidechained much else. I think there's an additional finger snap further down the track, but again it's only these basses being sidechained. Okay, I should talk about my bus setup. I prefer to mix things with buses, so I tend to send everything through it to some sort of bus and leave the original faders pretty much where they are. Normally I would set a level I'd like with the initial fader, unless I'm doing volume automation, and leave it there and then mix it with the buses. So I'd send all the kicks to one bus, all the snares to one bus, and so on with the drum kit, and then I would send all the individual drum buses to a master drum bus, which is there. So I've got the kick, snare, hats, fills. For some reason the leads in front of that, and they're all going to the master drum bus. This kind of allows me to like mix the drums with each instrument, so I can balance the kick and the snare, sort of have them peaking at the same sort of level, which is normally what I aim for. The kick and the snare to be peaking at about -6, and I kind of like them sort of at equal volume. That's normally my goal when it comes to kick and snares. In terms of hats, this particular track I had them mixed quite high. I actually used the compression to add quite a bit of gain to the hats, just to kind of bring the level up a bit, because they were a bit quiet in the mix. I do have snare fills, and to be honest I didn't do much with them. I bussed them into a separate bus for the fills, and yeah, I didn't do much in terms of processing in the snare fills. The master drum bus has just got a light compression just to kind of glue everything together. I do believe the snares are going to a reverb unit, but this might be set. Sometimes I tend to set the reverb on the actual original channel, which sometimes makes my life confusing. Yeah, I believe one of the snares is actually going to a reverb unit. I've got I think there's 4 reverbs in this track. There's 2 at the beginning, 3 at the beginning, sorry, and there's one for vocals right at the end, because I tend to work with vocals last and I like to use a different reverb unit, so it ends up being at the end of the track, which is kind of a pain. yeah, I think that's it in terms of drums. I do like working with bus channels a lot, so yeah, that's that. Uh, my bass sounds. The way I work with bass sounds normally is I split them up into frequency bands. So I'll send sort of the low basses to one bus, the mid basses to another bus, and the high basses to another bus, and this allows me to sort of like play with different sort of frequencies of the bass. I generally have the sub to low bass sounds in mono and going straight through the centre. To be honest, I have all bass sounds going in the centre. I don't really have a reason for having it in mono other than it seems to sound better sometimes. I do have a bass amp on the low. This is kind of just to like add a little more power to it. Sometimes the sub basses can be kind of weak, so the bass amp is just to kind of add gain really more than anything. I do have a dip, that's for the kick. The kick was roughly hitting at about 83 Hertz, so I do always cut out the sub bass for the kick. I suppose I should play them rather than talk about them. Okay, so I thought I'd just play you the bass parts in their different frequency bands. I had to restart Logic, but anyway. Okay, so that's just the sub. Just kind of sounds like a siren wave, to be honest. In terms of processing on the mid frequencies, there's not a lot really. I'm using this as a compression sort of, and okay, there's not really a lot going on with the mid-range in terms of the bass. Sometimes I would throw a distortion unit or a compressor in the mid-range, but in terms of this track, it was mainly just to sort of isolate it from the sub-frequencies. I do have a exciter on the higher bass parts. This was just to kind of, again, just give it a bit more sort of like high end, a bit more aggression. Nothing kind of blend in with it kind of gives it that 8-bit sound that the original kind of has on the bass, that particular bass patch. Okay, so the lead synth, I've got it sent to a reverb unit, which is in a bus 1. Again, the bus was mainly just to control the level. I do have this plugin on it, which I probably shouldn't. But, and the same for the other synth part. Where is it? I think I named it Phase Keys. Yeah. Oh, okay. On the other synth part, I do have a tremolo to try and recreate that stereo sweep. I don't actually have an auto panner, and this is the easiest way I can do it without downloading an auto panner. I think that's everything. In terms of mixing, like I said before, I tend to mix with the bus channels rather than the actual original inputs. So my inputs can sometimes be super messy, but in the end I generally ignore them and mix with the bus channels. I do set the initial volume when I make the sound, and I sort of balance the initial volume when I make the sound, but a lot of my mixing is going on through the bus channels. In terms of the master, oh, I suppose, yeah, so I did forget one thing. There is, throughout the track, there is a, high pass filter on the build ups. Normally I would only send the elements I would want to high pass to a bus and use the bus as a high pass filter, but it actually sounds like on the track that he did stick it on the master bus and sort of just sweep everything. So that's what I did basically. I put a filter on the master bus and just automated a relatively steep sweep in the build-up sections. Suppose I should play one of them. So he does pull down the cut-off filter before the start of the bar or drop. This is for the snare fills before the actual start of the next bar. Again, because I put the filter on the master output rather than busing what I wanted to filter to a separate bus, you can sort of hear a notable sweep down when the filter cuts back down to 0. I kind of tried to get it as close as possible with the sort of least amount of curve, but I think at least in my project there's always a noticeable sweep down when I do this method of filtering. Sometimes I deliberately did a shorter sweep down. I think this is just because he does it in the actual track. I also have sort of like just a pitchy build-up sort of sound. Yeah, that was just basically made by tuning the master tune, like basically tying the master tune to a sort of rotary knob and then just sweeping it up on the synth. I think that's about it. In terms of processing on the master, I do have a compressor on the master. I don't think it's doing much. Oh, it's doing quite a lot actually. Again, this is just to try and like keep levels in control and try and glue everything together. I don't normally put a lot of stuff on the master channel, to be honest. I normally leave it quite clean. Yeah, so that's basically my process in recreating this track. I think it went okay. Some of the sounds are not quite where I want them to be. And yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you for watching, and yeah.